Sometime during our life, we all experience elements of stress. Sometimes it can be a positive feeling, an anxious feeling, something that motivates us and pushes us forward. But a lot of times, stresses can be very negative and hard hitting in our lives. I've been speaking to quite a few people recently, and they've been going through different emotional stress, either with their health or with family members' health. And so I just thought it would be important to kind of explore elements of stress. I know we've touched on stress in other videos, but I think we can just focus on stress and anxiety right now. So sometimes when we are going through elements of stress, it's because we're asking ourselves the question, what if? So what if this happens? What if that happens? And because we're asking those kind of questions, we're coming with answers which are generally quite negative. And those negative answers are causing us to become physically anxious. So the worry part is that our thoughts, the things that we're thinking about, the questions that we're asking ourselves, and then we've got the physical part of stress and anxiety, where we start to feel in our bodies that fight and flight kind of syndrome. So the fight and flight is where our body is preparing to run away in essence, or to fight. And so what happens is that our blood goes to our muscles, because we need to have the energy inside our muscles so we can flee or fight, and it moves away from things like minor things like our stomach, for example. So you'll get that butterfly feeling in your stomach because the blood's moved away from there. You'll get heart palpitation because our heart's going to go faster, preparing us to run away, preparing our body. Now, in some situations, of course, if there's a threat, then that's really, really important and something that we need to happen, because we need to be prepared. But if you're having that sensation and that's staying there and it's not resting, then that can be a drain on the body and cause chronic fatigue and cause extra kind of physical ailments to our body. High blood pressure, it can cause inflammation and disease and disorders in our body, and of course emotional distress. So although stress has its good points in that it can prepare our body and we can move forward and we can do what we need to do, it can also have its negative side if it continues, or even if you'll be feeling the sensations of stress and there's no threat. So that's something that we need to look at. I suppose what's important is that we have developed in ourselves ways of managing stress, and some of the ways can be very effective and very positive. Some can be positive in the short term, and then some can be quite negative in the long term, and some can be quite positive in the long term. So there's lots of different techniques that we've used, and we tend to go back to ones which are familiar and comfortable with us, or ones that we've used in the past and it's been effective, even if sometimes that can be quite disruptive. So we're going to explore some of those things, and generally when we're under that kind of stress and we use those coping mechanisms, especially if they're ineffective ones, it's because we're trying to avoid that stressful situation. So I've made a few notes just to make sure that I tapped on each area. And before we kind of look at some of the negative effects, I think we just want to just touch a little bit more on the aspect of some of the physical changes that go in our bodies and some of the signs and symptoms, probably a better way of saying it. Okay, so a lot of people that are going through that kind of feeling of anxiety, so that's the physical elements that's coming from that stress. We're looking at sleep disturbance, so you're finding it hard to go to sleep, you find it hard to remain asleep, and also you're not sleeping for a long distance of time, or when you wake up you do not feel refreshed. So everybody has their own time scale with regards into how long they sleep. So for example, you might find somebody that has to sleep 8 hours in order to feel refreshed, and then you've got another person that only sleeps 3 or 4 hours and they wake up and they're absolutely fine. So it's very unique. Just like stress and anxiety, it's very subjective and unique to you. Your sleep is unique to you as well. So don't worry if you're not getting a full 8 hours sleep. If you wake up and you're refreshed, then that's okay. Remember also, I suppose, as we get older, our need for sleep changes, and we might need less sleep as we get older. So that's another factor to think about. If you're saying, well, I used to sleep 8 hours, now I only sleep in 5, it could just be because you're maturing. So don't worry too much about that. Okay, So sometimes when you're under a lot of stress, you can find it hard to concentrate and hard to focus, especially if there's going to be sleep disorders as well. That can add to that dimension. But you could find it hard and find that your confidence in yourself, find it hard to make decisions. You're so worried about what could possibly go wrong. You're trying to predict the future, and it's very negative that you can't move forward. You find it hard to take action. So our thoughts, our conversations that we tell ourselves, our concentration, these can be all affected by our stress levels. We talked already about the fight and flight. So you're aware that your body is trying to prepare you, and it's taking blood away from your internal organs to your stronger, larger muscles so that they can work more effectively. But then that can have an effect where you're feeling uneasy in yourself, you're feeling agitated, irritated, because them sensations are going on, especially if they're going on for long periods of time. So that's the things to worry about. Aches and pains, of course, your body could get inflamed. If your body's inflamed, then you're getting those kind of aches and pains. And we talked about the butterflies in your stomach, things like that. So feeling exhausted and out of control, feeling chronic fatigue, these can be all signs that in fact you are stressed. So I just want to touch a little bit on that. I'm sure there's more, but my main focus was to look at negative effects of how we manage stress, some of the negative ways that we manage stress, which might seem normal for you and effective in the short term, but in the long term can actually cause problems and cause more stress. Can cause more stress in long term. So that's something I wanted to talk about, and that's the main area here. So some things that might seem really effective in the short term could be things like alcohol and drugs, because you might find that having a stiff drink can relax you, or having a few drinks can relax you, taking different kinds of drugs can relax you. So in the short term that can be very, very effective, but long term that can cause a dependence, and also you haven't dealt with the real issues. So the real issues are whatever was triggering to cause that stress hasn't gone away. All you've done is distracted yourself away from that. And that distraction can not only be with things like alcohol and drugs, it can be music, it could be playing games, social media, it could be arguing with your spouse, that kind of distraction. All those things can be distractions which can may stop you feeling stressed at that immediate moment, but can cause long-term issues and long-term problems. And some people, I know as my clients, they feel a sense of relief if they self-harm, and that's something that's very worrying, because of course that can lead to suicidal tendencies. But there's something about that distraction of cutting or harming themselves where they're feeling a sensation, and then that can be satisfying. So I've had a client where there's lots of different techniques that you can use. Some can use by marking on a red pen on their arm, and that can sometimes give the same kind of satisfaction. Using a rubber band where you can flick the rubber band, and that can give that kind of sensation where it's a boost of just discomfort, but that can be a distraction in a positive way. So there are alternative ways of coping with stress as opposed to self-harming. And I'm talking self-harming is the extreme, of course, but it's something that I think it's important that we talk about. The element of predicting the future, and I think this is something that is very common in people who are going through a lot of stresses. When you try to unpick what's going on for that person, it is really much about the what ifs. What if that happens, or I know this is going to happen, and I'm sure this is going to happen. That certainty can cause a worry which doesn't even exist. You're concerning, you're fearing over situations which aren't in present reality. And so that can cause even more anxiety, even more stress, and you've got that cycle that's going on, and then you're just preparing for the worst. And whether it happens or it doesn't happen, physically you're in extreme discomfort and in extreme emotional pain. So that's something. And I suppose what we will tap on is actually the perceived benefits of worry and some of the purposes of worry. So we'll touch on that, the beliefs that we have on worry. That's one thing that I think we'll touch on after I finish this element. Okay, so in the same line of distraction, like the drugs, alcohol, drinks, drugs, alcohol, and self-harming. So I get my words out, and self-harming. In the same way of distracting yourself, it can also be overstretching yourself and overworking yourself. So I know I was talking to a dear friend of mine, and she was giving a list of all the different things that she was doing, and then she's very exhausted in herself, but she has to do all these different things, putting that pressure on herself. And sometimes we can put that pressure on ourselves because we're actually distracting ourselves from the real stresses. So the stress could be, I've got a lot to do, but I don't, and I might not be able to do it. But instead of you dealing with that issue, which could mean that you could delegate, that you could do other things, you kind of add more responsibilities to yourself. And you're distracting yourself in that you're so busy that you can't think of the core concern. The core reason gets overlooked because you keep yourself so busy, and then sometimes you're not going to explore that core time until it's like, you know, late at night, and then that's causing you problems to sleep because now you're dealing about the core things where you might be the core questioning, or the core thing that's causing you stress is I can't do it. And then you could be thinking, I can't do it at night time, and then that can cause you more stress. So you're exhausting yourself and only sleeping when you're at peak of exhaustion. So it's important to think about, are you overworking yourself to avoid thinking about the stress or the concerns in your life? And that's something that you need to explore. And sometimes, which is something we come through, which people don't think about, is the element of the perfectionist. So you meet people who they have to do everything, it has to be done right, and so because it has to be done right, they have to do it. And we think that that person is just, you know, the perfectionist, and they will like things a certain way, and they're a hard worker. Well, sometimes it can be the fact that they're actually stressed and they're worrying, and because they're so worried that things are going to go wrong, they're like, I have to do everything myself, and that can actually be a stressor for them, you know, where you're fearing of getting things wrong, and so you have to do it, and you're overworking yourself in order to achieve that. But the core thing is, it's going to go wrong. So avoiding that risk, you want to minimize that risk, and the only way to do that is to do it yourself, and then that can cause emotional strain, and that's where you can lead to burnout when that goes out long term, you know. And a lot of people don't really think about that. Perfectionist is actually could be somebody that is very worried and very stressed. So, as I said, you know, you're overreaching yourself and not taking any risks. And then also the aspects you can end up blocking yourself in that you can be so fearful of getting things wrong that you don't start. So I know somebody that was close to me, and they were decorating a house, and because they hadn't decorated a house before, they were making sure, over-researching things, making sure they had all the equipment and the latest equipment and all these different techniques, over preparation. And then it got to the point that it was just so over preparation and over fretting about the situation, over stressing about the situation, and then it doesn't get started at all. So you're just like sitting there worrying and getting around to it, and because you don't want to make a mistake, you don't start. Well, I always say, look, sometimes it's best to aim for the target, and then once you've aimed and you've shot for that target, if it hasn't got where you wanted to go, then you can correct. But if you never fire it off in the first place, you'll never know. So sometimes it's good to take action, and take some action is something that's really, really important. The element's very similar to that, not being able to start and blocking yourself, step blocking. It can be that kind of overprotective. So if you can think of that overprotective parent or partner that is so worried that something's going to happen to the child, or happen to the partner, or happen to the relationship, that they can be just overprotective and overwhelming, and always needing high levels of reassurance, prevent the children from taking any kind of risk. So they can't go out, they can't go out to play, they can't do different activities because there's fear. With a relationship, always asking, do you love me, do you care about me, overprotective on that way as well. And that can be the stress and the worry, and it's expressing itself in that way, where they always need that level of reassurance that you care, that everything's going to be okay, and that risk has been minimized. And life is about risk, so sometimes we need to take risks, and sometimes you need to be able to have confidence in yourself. So that's something that's really, really important, because it can be detrimental to your emotional relationship, and it can be detrimental to your relationship with your children or family member. So making not making a decision, which is something that we've already talked about, being over possessive, over checking. Oh, we've covered a lot of this. We're doing really well. Avoiding, we've done all that. Obsessive, perfectionist, overthinking, excellent, we've done all that. Excessive distractions, we've done all that. So I think we've hit the targets. That's really, really quick, and that's really, really good. And what I did want to talk about, which is on here, which was about our beliefs about worrying. And why do we have that? Of course, there is the element of stress being very subjective and very unique to you, but sometimes we can have that kind of beliefs about the purpose of worrying, and how does it serve us. So it could serve us in that we might if we have an element of stress, there's a problem, and we have that element of stress, then we can actually help to solve that problem. So that can be really good in that way. We can plan to avoid risk. Or I've got a friend of mine, and she would always wait to the last minute to do an assignment if she had an assignment to do. And it's just like, well, you've known about it for weeks, but you're just waiting and doing it all nighter, because the pressure and the stress of having to get it done pushed her to get it done. So some people can work off that stress level, which is good, unless something goes wrong and you can't do it, then that can be a problem. And working that way for some people, if it's the last minute, everything's the last minute, that can cause its own stress, because you think there's a higher risk of failure. So that's something to think about it. But some people are motivated by that, or feel that they are. So prepare yourself emotionally. So some people can think that they should worry and they need to worry because that's what parents do. I worry about you because I care about you, and if I didn't care about you, then I wouldn't worry, and if I'm not worrying, that means I don't care. So that's kind of be the story, the narrative that some people tell themselves, and because of that narrative, it means that they're worrying about everybody, because that's how they're showing that they care. So that can be something that can happen as well. And that could be whether it's about your children, work, or studying. So it doesn't matter what kind of purpose you think that it's, or the rationale for why you're worrying. Another issue could be where people are worrying that something's going to go wrong. So in essence, if it goes right, it was like, whoa, that's a relief. That's okay, and maybe it went right because I was worrying about it and reducing risk. Or it could be when it does go wrong, you've prepared yourself already. So you've already thought, oh, it's going to fail, so I knew it was going to fail, because you worried it through and you've thought it through. And so now you're kind of fulfilling it. In essence, it could become a self-fulfilling prophecy, but in a way, it's kind of preparing you for that failure, so you doesn't feel so bad. So in essence, you can say, this relationship is going to go really, really bad. I know it's going to go bad. And so in the relationship, you're always checking and waiting to see, oh, is things going bad? Do you care? Do you care? Do you care? And when that person's had enough and gets fed up and left, you turn around and say, well, there you go. I told you that it wasn't right and things were good. They didn't care for me. Do you know? So in essence, you're prepared yourself in a way, because you're thinking, I know things aren't going to go good for me. And there you go. There's a proof. So sometimes we think it serves as a purpose, protecting our emotions. As I said, with regards to life, I always think of it as being seeking love and affection, or avoiding pain. So you've got those two ways. So one way of avoiding pain is to prepare yourself for that pain. So in a way, you're avoiding it, if you get it. Yes, that's there. So we've looked at how stress can serve you. We've looked at some of the signs and symptoms of it. We've looked at the negative ways that we can manage it, looked at some of the anxiety there. So let's talk a little bit about some tips and some techniques for coping with stress, and a bit more positive. I said with all the techniques, even the ones that we talked about, the ones that are a little bit ineffective, I suppose some of the things in the short term, it can feel okay in the short term. If you're worried about something, you're worried that other people are going to do it and get it wrong, you do it yourself, it might resolve the stress in the short term. But sometimes it can have a long-term detrimental effect, in that you can end up becoming chronically fatigued. So we can look at some ways of managing stress and managing anxiety and worry, and even lifting mood with regards to depression, which can result from all the stress and anxiety. But we can look at what we can do that are a bit more positive. So Let's start with physical movement. Actually, being physical, whether it's going to be exercise, dancing, doing something that you enjoy, whether there's some kind of movement, going for a walk, that can help to detox your body, detox your mind, and help to relieve the stress and calming, send enough of those calming and relaxing hormones. So that's can be really, really good to make you feel good about yourself. If you're enjoying yourself, the dopamine's rising up because you're enjoying yourself in that movement, especially if you're doing something that you enjoy doing. So also the physiology of your body and how you carry yourself can be a massive big difference. If you're always looking low and depressed and head hanging down and stuff, you can actually, you know what it looks like when you're depressed. If you're walking around like that all the time, then you actually can induce it. Whereas sometimes even just to lift yourself up and to, get washed, get dressed, put on nice clothes, have a clean environment, all those things which make you feel good. If you do those things, then that can also help to keep your anxiety away, keep the stress away, and to help you to think more clearly. And if you're thinking more clearly, you can resolve those problems in a positive way. Mindfulness, meditation, or prayer. These are all those quiet times where you can be in yourself and have that quiet, calm moment, those peaceful moments. So whether you kind of be mindful, and that could be, you could be in the shower and you can just be experiencing what the water feels like on your skin, the temperature of the water, the sounds around you, or the feeling of the soap. You actually just taken in every experience, and that just can help you to calm and just to be present and be aware of what's going on for you. And the same that you would do if you was meditating or you were praying, it helps you to calm down and focus, and that can be really, really good. And that leads into things like relaxation, focusing on your breathing, which is something that we don't think about because we're just automatically doing it. But sometimes if you focus on it, and you might be thinking about your breathing now because I've mentioned it, and you're noticing how many breaths you're having, how deep your breaths are having. But we can actually use that as a way of calming your body down. You can't be stressed and relaxed at the same time. And by controlling your breathing, you can actually physically calm your body down. And you could even say the word relax, and that can actually help in that relaxation and that calming. Action, as I said, sometimes you can block yourself because of the fear and anxiety, but sometimes taking those actions, even if it's only small steps towards your goal, that can help you to get there. If you never start, you can never finish. But if you start, and even if it's those baby steps, you're always moving closer to your goal. And what you find is that the more you progress, the more you do, the easier it gets. So that's something to do. So avoidance. Just do it. Having routine and habits is another way of putting things in place for you that can be effective. So it can become a habit, a routine, that you go for a massage once a month, or you go for that walk, or you spend time with family. If these are things which help to keep your stress levels and anxiety levels down. So there I've got another video where we talk about the RAP plan, which is a bit more precise, and there's a booklet, a free booklet that comes along with that. So please check that out, the RAP plan, and that can help you there. As I said, you having a clean environment can help you to have clear thoughts. But also when we talk about stress and anxiety and your environment, it could also mean the friends that you're hanging around with. That includes your family and friends, and your pets. All those things are part of your environment, which can have a negative effect if you're around people that are like spiritual vampires, draining your energy. So you can have people around you, and they can lift up your spirits, they can make you feel good, but also you can have people around you that can bring you down. The kind that I'm talking about, where if you're in their presence for too long, you need to go and lie down, or you're like, you're dreading it, you have to build yourself up in order to go and be in their company. So it's about saying to yourself, okay, do I really need to be in that person's company? If I am, how long for? What can I do beforehand to get yourself ready so that when you're in that person's company, they're not draining you dry? Writing things down. I'm a big writing things down kind of person. So let's write things down. That can be creative. It can be your journal where you can actually express what's going on for you. You actually ventilate in that way, especially if you can't ventilate to another person. It could be artwork, or doing a puzzle. It can be doing that kind of doing something that's playing music, or doing something that's making you think. I know when I was going through a very difficult time in my life, then I haven't succeeded, but I attempted to learn French, and it was very useful because while I was trying to learn French and trying to speak French in my mind, it stopped me from speaking English and getting myself worked up and stressed until I could calm myself down and then start dealing with the issues. So if you see me watching a lot of language courses, then that's probably a sign that I'm going through a bit of stress. But anyway, you got to do what you do for you. So exploring the self-talk, I think that's something that's really important as well. And I like to talk about Katie Bryan, because what Katie Bryan does is that she does something called the work. And in that, you're asking yourself 4 questions. Is it true? Is it really true? How does it make me feel? How would I feel if that wasn't there? And then you got that kind of the turnabout. I think that's the thing, something like that. Quote me on that. Is it true? Is it really true? How does it make me feel? How would I be without it? And the turnabout, something like that. But I think that's really important to kind of question your thoughts and feelings. So sometimes you can have a feeling, oh, things are going to go really, really bad. I just know it. And then you go, well, is that true? And sometimes it's not. There's no evidence to support that. But if you unpick it, then that can help you to descale the situation. And sometimes the stress that's being caused is about the story that we tell ourselves, that narrative that we tell ourselves. That's what's causing the stress, as opposed to the situation. So it's good to question your thoughts and your self-talk. So if your self-talk, I mean, things like where you might say to yourself, oh, I'm a bad person, or nobody's going to love me, nobody cares about me, or I never do anything right, everything always goes wrong for me. All those kind of things, sometimes you need to just question, say, well, is that true? And then even list, there's gratitude list where you can list all the things that's been going well for you that day, that hour, that month, that year. Do you know what I mean? Because sometimes we can focus on the negative and not focus on the positive. And so writing it down can be useful that way, but also exploring and questioning your self-thought. And also, be kind to yourself. And I think that's really, really important. And another element is about holding on to truth. As I said, when you're saying to yourself, nothing ever goes right, well, that in itself is not true. Do you know, things have to go right. You woke up that morning, that went right. So sometimes we have to hold on to the truth and not the story. So holding on to that truth can be important. Physical things that we can do, which is important as well, not only like the dancing, but looking at alkaline in our diet. So some foods can be quite acid forming, and that causes inflammation and stress on our bodies, and that inflammation of course is going to cause pain and discomfort, achy joints and bones. So we can look at what foods we're eating. So some of the foods that we think of as being comfort foods can actually short term sedate you, which is what's happening. So there's high carbs, the sugar, the dairy, the carbs, they can really knock you out, make you sleep and make you feel really, really good. But long term, it can actually cause discomfort and dis-ease and cause your body to become acid. That high sugar and stuff can cause your body to become very acid and cause long-term problems. So sometimes we've got to look at what is our diet doing. If we are going through stress, we actually need to alkaline our body so that our body is in the best state so that it can deal with the stress. And of course, you know that when your body's under any kind of stress, you're depleting your magnesium levels, because your magnesium in your body is what your body uses to relax you and calm you down. So if you're in a high state of stress all the time, then you're releasing that magnesium as your body's trying to rejuvenate, recover and relax you. So you need to boost your levels up. If you know you've got something very stressful, say for example an exam or a test, something's going on for you, it's good, even if you're doing physical sports, because remember you lose magnesium in your sweat, it's good to have a good soak in a bath, 30-minute soak in the bath, get your levels up, or to put the creams on, lotions on, oils on, or the body wash, get your levels up so that when you're going through that stress, you've got something to work off. And then after you've gone through the stress, rejuvenate, put that magnesium back so that your body's got something to work with. Your leafy greens are full of magnesium. Your fruit and vegetable, they've got magnesium in it as well, which is why having that in your body can help to alkaline your body, reduce stress and help to rebalance and rejuvenate and recover. Remember, magnesium works on your cells, so if your cells are working more effectively, you're working more effectively. Also, herbal teas, which again is going to be the element of the greens, because in the green leaves, that's where your magnesium lies. But also things like aromatherapy, having beautiful scents around you, could be on your person. You could put a bit of some people like lavender or something that they can put on their clothes or on their person, and so they can smell that, and that can have that kind of calming effect. So that's important as well. Oh, and I think we've kind of covered lots of different things there. So that's been going on for a while. I want to try and keep it a little bit short. And I think we've covered quite a lot of areas. Tell me what you think. Of course, there's more information about magnesium at morgangenius.com. So please go over to Morgan Genius and find out a bit more. But also use the comment section, contact me. You can find me on WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all over the place. Just put in Sophia Morgan Genius and let me know if you agree, if there's elements that you want me to explore. I will explore. But I said right now, I think stress is something that's very big. We're feeling it. We've got situations that you cannot control, and that can become very stressful. But what you can control is your reactions to that stressful event. So you might not be able to control the event, but you can control your reactions to that. And depending on how you react could determine the outcome. So let's take a step back, question our thoughts, put positive routines inside our life so that we can cope in the future, and then positive things that can help us to actually develop positive coping mechanisms, as opposed to things can help short term and be disastrous long term. And of course, most importantly, get your magnesium levels up, get your mineral level up, your magnesium levels up, get your mineral levels up, because that's so important to our overall health and well-being. So I hope that's been useful. It's been enjoyable speaking with you. I'm glad I've been able to share that with you, and I'll try and do some more topics soon. Just let me know what you want, and we can do some topics together. I said I specialise in, of course, magnesium and elements of mental health. So speak to you soon.